If I had a hammer, I'd a hammer in the morning, I'd a hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd a hammer out danger, I'd a hammer out a warning, I'd a hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh, if I had a bell, I'd a ring it in the morning, I'd a ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd a ring out danger, I'd a ring out a warning, I'd a ring out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh, if I had a song.
Watching us on 9/5/17, you're watching us live, and this is Progressive Radio on TV, and our title tonight is Regulations Protect Us. Let me say that once again, regulations protect us. Although when you hear Republicans speak, they think they just interfere with, I guess, life in general. But we have two wonderful people here tonight. Let me just shake hands here of Cliff Goldman, progressive activist.
Thank you very much.
Moses Ross.
Hello, Cliff.
Hello, Caleb.
How
Yeah,
are you?
and Cliff too.
Caleb.
You guys are
Hello, Cliff.
you guys are well known to each other too. You've been here a lot, and you know each other really well. Have you been just amazed at what's happening in Houston for the last? It's tragic. It really is tragic. Oh my gosh.
It really is tragic. And
Katrina too.
Yes.
And it's kind of, you know, it kind of fits with the theme that we're talking about
Yes.
here tonight as far as regulations, because Houston is usually lifted up as a model of a city that has no zoning laws and encourages no planning in their layout. Let the market determine it, and look what's happened. The amount of flooding and devastation is just, it's of historic proportions. And God forbid if we had some regulations that were involved, some common sense ones, like, you know, President Obama had implemented some flood protections, some requirements through the EPA that were recently by Trump, they were not implemented, or they were disregarded.
10 days before the floods, Trump said, no, we're not going to use these ideas, which would have mitigated some of the destruction.
Right.
And no, we don't want any zoning, we don't want any walls, we don't want to protect the dams there. No, let's just go for it. Well, this is one of the problems with just going for it.
Right.
Regulations protect us, and there's a reason for that. So I don't.
You know, and there's another good example there in Houston as well, as far as the chemical plants that they have there, and the lack of regulations as far as transparency. What kind of chemicals are in there? They have literally the protection of the government to not disclose that information to inquiries from the public. And so all of a sudden we have this massive flooding going on, and we have these chemicals that are reacting negatively to flooding, and all of a sudden we have deaths that are going to be caused because of the fumes. And so common sense regulations are needed, and there's a role for them.
The great person I like, I don't want to say goddess necessarily, but Rachel Maddow had a terrific presentation about 5 years ago, and she was talking about how a company had blown up in Texas in a town, and I don't think it was Crosby, but it was at any rate it's surrounded by 3 schools and so on. Only 15 people or so killed when this huge explosion went off. And at that point, the governor of the state changed the rules a bit, not to reveal what was going on in the plants, but to say that the plants themselves don't have to tell people what they had within them. You know, so that if you are going to live next to a chemical factory, you don't necessarily know what's in the factory. And the Arkema plant, remember, this thing also blew up in Crosby. And this thing, the Arkema said, well, we think it's going to blow up. They were asked, what's in the plant? And Arkema said, the head of Arkema, CEO, said, oh, I'm not sure it would help you if I told you what was in there. He had contributed many millions of dollars, at least the company had, it's a European company, to reduce the ability of people to find out what's going in there. So you're right, Moses. When you say lack of transparency, holy gosh, I mean, they define it there, you know. We're not going to tell you what's in the plant next to you that may blow up and may blow up your village and so on.
Well, it's definitely a libertarian paradise down there in Texas right now, and we're also seeing the negative effect of this type of an approach to governance and to community.
Yes.
You know, I mean, for all of the complaining that people have here in the state of Oregon, and especially in Portland, when it comes to zoning laws and density and livability, you know, maybe there is a reason that we do that. Maybe there is a reason that we set these parameters up front, and because they are contributing to what we want out of a lifestyle, what we want out of a community, and looking at both the short and the long term. So.
Absolutely correct. I mean, it's crazy not to be safe and not to just how the panic that this has brought out for so many hundreds of thousands of people in that area. And their lives will never be the same. So many of them lost many tens of thousands of dollars. They'll never regain what they had.
That's right.
So yeah, maybe the boom town would be a little less if they had zoning, good regulations, and so on too. But lives would have been safer. The people would have had futures and so on too. Well,
I mean, let's take another example that Houston is highlighting, the flooding is highlighting. The fact that there are Superfund location sites in around Houston that have been flooded, that have little to no EPA supervision and regulation. And all of a sudden now they're flooded, and all of that topsoil that had those problems is now being spread out. And there's no effort, or I'm sure I hope there's some sort of an effort being made to contain the mess. But the challenge is that there is the EPA is so underfunded under the current administration, let alone being led by Scott Pruitt, who is just an ideologue for the Breitbart.
One of the things that Pruitt is doing, he wants the drilling platforms in the Atlantic to be able to throw their tailings off into the ocean. I mean, to just sluice it out there. Wow. We don't worry about how we're polluting the waters. You go, what are you smoking? I mean, he's also cutting back CO2, monitoring methane, and so on. And Trump too is reducing the automation standards and mileage standards for the fleets of cars. Words fail me.
Well, you know what worries me, and Cliff, I know that you agree with me, is that the short-term effect is really discouraging and immediate, but the long-term effect of all of this deregulation is cumulative. That's right. And what do we do about it? How do we correct it in the future? When we can get the current administration out.
Elections have consequences.
Right.
Elections have consequences, and one. This was some information that I got from People's World.
Okay.
And they're talking about one of the mantras of the radical right in this country is that the economy and everything else would be better off if we just had less government regulation. I mean,
yes.
It doesn't. This is America. It was founded by freedom, freedom from, and freedom to do whatever you like, and that is the problem now. We are talking about Republicans, okay. Well, since Lincoln told us that government was for, a Republican by the way, was for buying up the people, I guess that this means that Republicans and other right-wingers don't think American people should have much say in their government, because if the government and the regulators is actually for and buying of the people are technically regulating themselves. Now, for their own benefit, but of course the problem is that the extreme freedom or doing just what you want to do all the time has to be corrected, and so that is where regulation comes in. All of us have to be regulated. And one of the things, I'm a speech pathologist, is that about communication is not just saying something, but it's inhibiting things that you shouldn't say.
Right. No.
And you're regulating yourself. And there's nothing wrong with regulation, except that the extreme conservatives and Republicans are dead set against that because they think it is curtailing freedom. Now, it's interesting. In the 50s, we had really a high tax rate.
Yes.
A high corporate tax rate, 92%.
I was telling Sherry about that today.
Yep. And so that was an anti-greed tax But it was actually beneficial because corporations said, well, look, there's no point in making more money. Let's invest it in lower our taxes and our
Increasing the worth of the company.
right.
Yep.
And so the government has to rein us in. It has to be regulated. It has to be a mixed economy. I mean, so pure communism, socialism doesn't work. Pure capitalism doesn't work. It has to be mixed.
Right.
I agree with Tom Hartman, though. I was listening to him today. If you have just a free capitalistic society, you are going to have a feudal society with the top several percent very rich, a poor working class, and a lot of people who are absolutely horribly poor. A middle class, as Sherry and I were talking about this, it's an artificial thing to have a middle class. But it has been constructed before, should be constructed again. It requires progressive taxation.
Right.
And we're, so far, in terms of this tax change that Trump wants, who doesn't believe that all he wants to do is give tax giveaways to the top 1 or 2%?
That's right.
He's not interested in progressive
Well,
taxation.
hey, quite frankly, let's take it even one step down and say he just wants to benefit himself.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, let's face it, many of these decisions that he is making are meant to satisfy his own
Yes, avarice.
avarice. That's
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
Because maybe he's doing the opposite of what President Obama, who
Yeah.
very
So much of this is the
courteously,
opposite, right.
just to spite. I mean, I just question his motivations and how broad and far-reaching they are. I think they're pretty darn basic.
Yeah,
And
right.
as far as
Base is the
improving.
word, yeah.
You mean you're talking about Trump now?
I'm
Basic?
talking about Trump and
Yes.
his motivations.
Yeah.
Yes, he's trying to appease his 25 to 30% base of racists
Yes.
and white supremacists
Oh,
by,
no.
by not taking a position on Charlotte.
Yes.
But my point was that he's also satisfying an inherent need for himself to elevate himself,
Yeah,
versus the insults, the perceived insults that he's received by, or threat that he's received by real actual leadership like President Obama,
Well,
or experts, if you will.
I think Trump will be gone sooner than we think because of the investigations and so for independent prosecutors. But I think overall, looking back on this, it might be seen as a blessing, so to speak, or it was kind of good that Trump was in there for the time that he was. Why? Because there's always been a criticism that, the problem with government is that it's not run like a business.
Hoover said, more business in government and less government in business.
Yeah, right.
And Hoover was proven absolutely
right.
wrong.
And this shows that a CEO in business who is so used to getting his own way and not having to answer anything. There are no checks and balances in the boardroom.
That's right.
And so we have checks and balances. And so I think this may put to rest that idea, is that if only this was run like a business,
Right.
if you could only if the Congress could only manage the budget as I have to manage my checkbook.
You are
well, no,
optimistic.
that is not the way it
Well,
works.
I
You
might
gotta be in
have to, I
step.
might
You gotta
have to
be
agree a little
working.
bit with Cliff as far as the now that we have seen the extreme of a business, of a CEO coming in and treating government like a business and the negative effect that it can have on economic growth and the insidious effects that it has on capitalism and greed, and such. Maybe, just maybe, the electorate will finally figure out, like hopefully in 2020, that we need a good alternative. We need to elect someone besides Donald Trump. And I think the challenge of the Democratic Party is to be able to come up with first off, they need to resolve their issues, their intra-party issues, and make sure that they recognize the fact that they agree on 95% of all of the issues, and there's just a small little schism. But they need to come together and they need to coalesce behind a platform and a candidate that can very clearly contrast this abomination that we have with President Trump.
Let me be a cynic on this thing. And I'm going to turn to Noam Chomsky, who in his book Manufacturing Consent said that the the media has taken over the country, and if we don't recognize that, the national media, then we're already lost. And we really have lost. I mean, they are not talking about climate change. Why are they not talking about climate change? Because the oil companies and Koch brothers and so on pay them a lot of money, so they know that if they talk about climate change, they're not going to get that money for folks. Right. And it's one after the other. They're interested in globalization. They're interested in exporting jobs. Why? Because they're multinational corporations that owe these things. Anyway. I am cynical in the sense that I think we have to get rid of the power in some way of the major media.
And yet the media has been a check on Trump. I mean Trump
trying to be
hates the media, and that's a sign of an autocrat.
I think they're dancing together. I think one is they're Moonves, for instance, in the Moonves, Les Moonves. Who 6 months before Trump was elected said, "Oh God, help us! We brought you Trump, please." And he said, "But we're making at CBS so much money. We're making And 2 months.
That is cynical. You're right.
It's more than cynical. It's a goddamn way the system is set up. Yeah. No, it is. It is, and it's going to go on. It's going to be perpetuated and so on too. It's more than cynical. Well, and some other very large head of agency too, about a month ago said, "Yeah, we're making so much money with this." And they know they are. Right. And things aren't going to change because they feel they have no responsibility.
But I think that, they've begun to realize, though, that being, they danced with the partner that brought them to the ball.
It's going to pay them money.
Right, but they are beginning to realize that partner is making them have to pay the tab, in the sense that they are the ones being demonized as public enemy number one. This whole idea of transference of the idea that if Trump demonizes the media as public enemy number one, it means that is his public enemy number one. That is his enemy for number one enemy.
I don't,
what I'm saying, because they're the ones that can give us the truth.
As soon as Trump was elected, I said, "Oh, okay, our hero now is Senator Schumer in the Senate."
Chuck Schumer, not bad.
Yeah, because he can stand up, and just as the Republicans did to Obama, they blocked him and they said, "No, no, 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 no." Now we get to do that, and Chuck Schumer, he's going to be able to do that. But actually, you don't hear that much from him, but the people that I hear from on cable TV anyway, and certain other newsprint outlets, is a drumbeat of criticism of Trump.
Right.
And they are acting as the check. I thought it was going to come from Congress, but I think the press, although it serves them well and they make money, okay.
Yes, they make money.
It just, okay.
A lot of money.
On that basis, are you against fire departments?
What?
Because if there's a fire, that just shows that there's job security for the firemen. And that's kind of a cynical thing. Firemen are in favor of fire because they got something to put out. And that is obviously absurd, but just because you make money doing X, Y, or Z, it doesn't mean that you agree with that and you're part of that, that coalition.
And also Tom Hartman talks about this, it's not only, among other things, he says, it's not only what you focus on, it's what you're not focusing on with the press, with the national media. We're not focusing on climate change. We're not focusing much on income inequality. We're not with a hell of a lot on voter suppression. I mean, these things are off the table. I don't know why they're off, but they are off the table. And these are incredibly important things. The national media is not focusing on them. So it's not only what you focus on, but it's, follow the shiny, bright object along the corner. Voter suppression, talk about regulation, right? Where, the Supreme Court backs it up, and now we have Kobach and, the cross-check and so on.
Kansas.
Yeah, and we have the voter laws in Texas and so on, too. North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. It's Kansas, it's Indianapolis, Indiana, and so on. These are just incredibly destructive to the Democratic Party. We don't hear anything about that in the national media. So yeah, they might beat up on Trump a little bit and so on. We might enjoy that.
Well, they interview the people about it.
Are you
talk about it? And it's
what?
Well, they talk about, but they exactly. They talk about it, but they don't focus attention on it, and they don't convey the severity and the insidiousness of the importance of it all. And so, for instance, they'll give a passing comment towards, like the Russian hacking and how recently they have found that voter totals were actually hacked in certain states. But you have to go to a ProPublica site to actually read that article, which is just amazing to me.
Yes.
I mean, the fact that you can't read it at the Washington Post until
New
it's
York Times,
already so deep that they feel like they can profit from promoting that particular thing. So it's really, I mean, it all comes down to what do we do as individuals to counteract? What can we do? What should we do? What do we need to do as individuals to counteract this?
Go to the streets?
Hey, there is, I have seen,
Resistance.
I must comment that I have seen more organization, more motivation, more participation from people in my neighborhood than at any time in the past.
There's a lot of angst out there.
There's so much angst out there. I mean, you remember you remember how people's attitudes were when Bush, Gore, and how solidified everybody was, how polarized everybody was. This is different, man. This is completely different. People are pissed.
And the press cover that?
But the press doesn't need to cover it because they're realizing that they have to introvert before they can extrovert. They've got to organize within themselves. They have to organize these groups and make sure that they can become viable and become relevant.
Bernie's people and so on too.
Bernie's is another example of that. It's always the aspiration of every kind of a political member list, if you will, to be able to activate that list and to do things, for goals, political goals. But it's actually happening. I do see this undercurrent of discontent.
Boris O'Donnell on MSNBC, The Last Word, every night it's about Trump. Every night he's doing it, and Rachel Maddow's doing that, and it seems, and they are very much focused on the problem of Trump.
Well, okay, let me just point out.
So that's
well, one of the things that Bernie was focusing on, one of the things that Tom focuses on too, is not personalities. It's not what they're doing, what they're saying, and so on. It's issues. It's issues. Okay. Income inequality, climate change, and so on. And so if they're focusing on Trump, they're not saying, hey, what is he doing with climate change? What's he doing with EPA? What's he doing with the emission standards from automobiles, the mileage, and so on too. And I agree with both Bernie and Tom about that. The issues, most of the major issues, people agree with, but we don't get a chance to vote on those issues.
But see, here's the challenge now, in my view. Okay, yes, we are focusing on issues versus, we're separating the issues from Trump because the Democratic Party cannot run as an anti-Trump party because an anti-anything was not going to win. You have to be pro
It's not
something.
good enough, I agree.
You've got to be for something, not against something. So what they're going to be for issues. But the challenge is that when it comes down to activating people on the local level, politics are local. And so you have to give them a reason at the local level to participate or try to educate them and motivate them with the big picture
They are
approach.
participating, aren't they?
Yeah, but I
see
mentioned
people
but
involved and like they're going down the street.
Right.
And,
That's really got my-
there's a lot of activism out there, and why is it?
I've gone
Because
to meetings.
of the catalyst of Trump, and the press is covering that, and so
It covers Trump.
It is not a lecture study hour. It's a news hour,
but
and who's making the news are people and personalities. And you say, well, I'd like to be talking about
Issues.
about issues. Well, okay, issues are articulated by people, and it's not a professorial.
Tom Hartman made the point that when we had the fairness doctrine, and Nixon was asked what his idea was for health insurance. He went on for 10 minutes, and it was publicized widely on television. He got into the intricacies of these things, and we don't have that anymore. We have a quick soundbite, we have a quick story we maintain, but a real interesting thing too in terms of regulation. How about communities of color? African Americans. These are the people, unfortunately, who are in the, well, I mean, I don't want anyone to be in that, but especially not them, who are poor in so many ways. But they are in these places we have the environmental hazards time after time. You have Flint, Michigan, right? You have other places as well with incredibly bad water. And,
Speaking of water.
the sort of further harming those who have so little. It's just incredible. and EPA, of course, it's cutting back on monitoring, right? We're not going to monitor this stuff much anymore. It's amazing to me how people can do that and sleep night.
Well, it's a certain. There must be a certain coarseness, a certain selfishness.
Yes.
No
That
kidding.
is,
Less
that
of
is
heart.
amazingly
Yeah, I agree.
inherent to all of these policies and the people that promote these policies. It's once again, it's the extreme libertarian approach of individualism. You know, my way is the only way. You know, my way is the best way.
Let me just get this.
Of course.
Hey, caller, thank you for calling. Where are you calling from this evening? I beg pardon?
Portland.
Okay. Do you have a comment or idea or thought?
I do.
Go for it.
Well, hey guys, are you?
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey.
Thanks for calling in. That's great.
Hey guys, are you familiar with MAG, M-A-C-G?
MACD?
M.A.
M-A-C-G. And what do you think about the process that's going on now with MAG and building tiny houses on church property?
That's an interesting, the small house approach.
Okay, yeah.
That is really an interesting approach to housing.
Yeah, we help the homeless a lot.
Oh, put homeless in there, right?
Yes,
Is that what-
it's
oh,
very,
okay,
very
yeah.
small because
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so much of the difficulty with the
fine,
homeless, they don't have a space that they can call, they don't have a place they can lock up. But the small houses is such an interesting thing.
Innovative, yeah.
Yeah, Clackamas Dems are interested in that, Portland Dems are interested in that too. You know, it's not going to be the total solution for the homeless, but the tiny houses gets at an important part of you know, the downside of being homeless. So do you follow that, sir?
I do.
Good. Are you in favor of it?
I am in favor of it. That's why I just had to call into the show.
Good. No, I think it's a great idea.
great,
The
yeah.
small houses are really, and also the homeowners too are now getting tax breaks for being allowed to put them up on their property. I just think that's, I think it's great.
I'm glad to hear that actually the homeowners are getting a tax break for helping.
That's right.
That's really good.
Yeah, and in their yards and so on too. So yeah, and we have to do something. You know, you drive around Portland, or anyway, you go around Portland, and you see so many homeless. It's just, I was listening to a Democratic, I think Rivera was her name, at any rate, presentation in Clackamas, and she said that so many of the homeless along the Sunset Corridor, for instance, they just can't afford to pay the rent. I mean, it's not that they don't want to be able to do that, but they just, the problems with the rent costs being so high and job opportunities so low. So,
And the big problem is you're right. The rent is too high.
Yeah.
For some reason, it's been growing and growing and growing.
Yeah.
And just like at PSU, the tuition increase,
yeah,
and it was 5%. Everything is going up. And
Yes.
the homeless people, if they don't have someplace to go, are
Yeah.
going to end up staying homeless.
yeah.
That would be a tragedy.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And, you know, people who aren't homeless, I mean, I've never been homeless like that, but I would imagine it's easy for me to say, oh, you know, they deserve it or something like that, and they sure as hell don't deserve it. I mean, this is America, the richest country in the world. We can afford to house people if we do
There
it
are some
carefully.
people that won't go into housing.
Yeah, I know. I'm a
Don't
psychologist.
follow the rules.
Well, but some people
There's
also
some people
just-
who don't want to
Yeah, no,
change, and
some people
it's
enjoy
okay if
being
they're
homeless.
out there, you know.
Yeah, but it's their choice even then. I hope they'll come in out of the cold at times. But no, I've worked with people who want
Yeah.
not to be in, but
I volunteered with MAG to do 2 nights a week in the warming shelters
Oh, good
when
for
it
you.
comes up at the end of November.
uh-huh,
Then I'm going to volunteer my time,
good for you.
hoping that other people will jump in.
Great. And so if people want to volunteer, where should they call?
Well, we're going through the St. Stephen's Church
St. Stephen's Church.
in Gladstone.
Uh-huh. In Woodstock, great. So St. Stephen's Church in Woodstock, and if they call the church, maybe they can find out a volunteer position.
They should. That would be wonderful.
Great.
And what was that you said? MAC? I didn't quite get that word that you.
MACG.
Gee,
MAG.
Meg. Okay.
Okay.
St. Stephen's Church. Sir, thank you so much for calling.
Yeah,
We're on
thank
your
you,
side of
yeah.
this.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
You know, I always get a kick out of people who say, and there's people who are living and they're characterizing poor, people at the lower end of the economic ladder who are living paycheck to paycheck. Now, who is not living paycheck to paycheck? I mean, are they talking about an elitist who have, so much money that they don't need paycheck? What percentage of the country is not living paycheck to paycheck?
Most are. I should say.
Well, yeah.
Let me just say who we are. We are Progressive Radio on TV, and you are watching us. If you're watching us live, you're watching us the first Tuesday of the month, and this is September 5. Our title of our show tonight is. I wrote down, regulations protect us. Do they harm us? Do they take their money, or do they protect us, gentlemen?
They protect us. Okay.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Get on an airplane where they don't check the.
Right. And you want it to be checked. Yeah. Right,
so hey, if you have an idea for a show you want to put on, please call up this station right here, and you can see it. Willamette Falls Community Media Center, 1101 Jackson Street, Oregon City, 97045, and give them a call at 503-650-0275. That's 503-650-0275. And you can learn how to operate equipment. You can learn how to put on your own show. And they are not going to force you to subscribe to any corporate line, whatever line. And also, if you want to call the show and give us your ideas, like the gentleman just did, our number here tonight is 503-650-0198, 503-650-0198. And our show tonight is about regulations and how important they are, no matter how much Republicans and so on, as you say, the libertarians want to get rid of them.
Well, and what we're talking about here is, with regulations, is, you have government regulations, federal regulations, you have state regulations, and you have local regulations, and it kind of feeding it back to what this caller just now was talking about as far as the homeless. And those are mostly local regulations that are dealing with them. And, it's funny, it's really easy. I've seen this happen a lot in communities where you have that NIMBY attitude towards these shelters, towards helping the homeless. And, sometimes maybe...
Not my neighborhood, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, not in my backyard.
Not in my backyard,
yeah,
right.
Okay.
Same thing.
We went through that here recently with the housing emergency that Charlie Hales had. They put the shelter in Multnomah in my neighborhood, and they had it there for 6 to 8 months. And there was a lot of pushback from the community. There was a lot of pushback, but there was a lot of acceptance. There was a lot of participation. Looking at the positive of it all, it really brought our community together to help others in our community that were just less fortunate. And that should be the default, it seems to me.
Right. It's interesting to me that the word regulation, that brings such a negative connotations in so many people. Now, an article by Steve Kusovich in the Dallas paper in 2014 was quoting Galbraith. And this is a quote. Without regulation, says Galbraith, the economy we have now would collapse altogether. The banking sector would fall apart if one does not have a minimal level of trust in the way that it handles people's assets. The transportation sector will fall apart if we don't keep the air traffic control system running. The food sector will fall apart if we don't have reasonably trustworthy controls over food quality. And we really want regulation. It's just that we are so self-absorbed and into our own self-interest, we just take for granted, well, we need things that are going to protect us. But if we want to do something in business or something like that, we want to be able to be unfettered. And you have to be fettered sometimes.
I think that this has been an insidious learning program that libertarians at the top 1% has embarked in to carefully make people say, I want freedom above all else, even though you give up your rights to an okay life or better life than okay. And once again, you have the Koch brothers, you have the top 1% that want to devastate governments, towns, libraries, and so on. Now that may sound extreme, but it's not. It's really not. Remember, the Koch brothers, they don't want you to sell energy back to the grid. They want to deny the rights for cable companies for towns to buy large companies to lower the cost of stuff. They really are anti, not socialistic, but anti-communitarian, where people do things together as a whole. in Texas, for instance, now the libertarians, the Republicans say, one of the solution there is to everyone donate money to the churches or go down and help people. You can do that. Ridiculous.
It's not enough.
It's not even. It's stupid as a suggestion. If you think that, either you're misinformed or you're lying, and you know how limited that is. We need regulations. We need all that we can all subscribe to. One of the things that I like, one of the images Tom Hartman has used before, is you ask a major league hockey player, would you like to wear a mask, when they weren't wearing masks, and the hockey player says no. I mean, because it puts you at a deficit. Ask a hockey player, do you think all hockey players, goalies should wear masks? And they say yes. That is, if you have a shared sacrifice and you can do it. But if you say, oh yeah, you can just, if you want to pay taxes, you can pay them, but the rest of us aren't going to do that. No, it's got to be a shared sacrifice, that works. And so, yeah, exactly correct. And the only way we're going to, for instance, get this climate matter more under control is if we have a huge outreach with government stepping into the breach. Naomi Klein wrote a book too. Recently about that, saying, this kind of has to be addressed. Capitalism has gone crazy, amok, and we just can't let it go.
You got to regulate it.
Have to regulate it. But I don't.
And that leads back to the larger argument of the corruption and the insidiousness of the finance system for political in politics.
Yep.
The ability of companies, corporations, of big entities with special interests to be able to finance very large and expensive campaigns against issues, for issues that they feel favorable on. And unfortunately, when it comes to regulations, using in the theme here tonight, most of the time, they are against regulations that inhibit their profit margin.
And we don't hear much about them in the mainstream media too. The banking things, and Elizabeth Warren's, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The Republicans are trying to strip that away. It's now headed by his cadre. They've recently, I guess, the last couple of years, they've returned $18 billion to people who've been ripped off. And you can read about Wells Fargo too, scandal after scandal. These companies, the banks themselves, when they're caught, they don't have to declare themselves to be guilty. They can just, with the federal government, say, we'll pay you some money, but you're not going to find any wrongdoing here. But it was just ridiculous in 2007, the subprime mortgage stuff. But no, I agree with you, Moses. And we now, remember, one of the things that Obama also wanted to do was to say, if you're a financial advisor and if you're working with the elderly on the retirement money, you have to tell them the truth about, the investment, right? And that has been rolled back by Trump. What a guy, one of the people.
Well, just private business going amok,
Well, and also it's once again, he is doing the bidding of people, of other people here. He probably could care a whit one way or the other on some of these things, but because he's had that whisper in his ear from Bannon or from Ivanka or something like that, he decides to take a position. It's like the transgender one. It's like the transgender in the military issue. Where did that come from? It had been resolved.
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Latent homophobia.
Well, it could be.
Well, it's beyond latent homophobia. It's beyond that.
Well, it's absurd.
It's beyond. It's beyond that in the fact that there had to have been another reason. Was that reason to appease a portion of his base, to be able to guarantee donations from large conservative PACs? What was the motivation?
He had a lot of religious evangelistic voters this time. It turns out that the evangelists are twice as likely as a non-evangelist to blame the poor people for their own lot in life. That is, they don't say outside forces. It's like you created that yourself. So you can look at the poor and say you created that.
It goes back to Calvinism.
Yes.
Like they tells the people that you should observe these principles and follow this religion. Well, how do I know that I'm going to heaven?
You're rich.
How do I know?
You're rich.
Because you are of the elect if you're prosperous.
Well, Joel Osteen,
and
too.
So therefore, anyone who is not prosperous, they're
their
less,
fault.
less than godly. Yeah,
Right.
right.
Well, see, one of the churches,
Prosperity
the,
gospel.
The church that Trump grew up in New York
Yep.
was led by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, who
He grew up there?
Yep,
yeah,
he
and
attended regularly.
He attended regular
no
services
kidding.
there of Peale, and his whole philosophy is based off of the fact that God is
Prosperity.
supposed of prosperity.
God smiles.
Yeah,
on
well,
you.
yeah.
Smiles on those that are wealthy, you know.
And people
Yeah,
deserve it.
yeah,
Even
yeah.
even
Exactly.
even
So-
even the
Right.
2-year-old with cancer deserves that. I mean, for
And see,
cancer,
the problem is, though, is that it doesn't take into account the masses that don't have the opportunities of others.
You bet.
It was a very general motivational type of a philosophy, but it wasn't meant to be taken so darn literally. You know what I'm saying?
No,
and Trump is Trump is a manifestation of it being taken literally in his brain, as far as how to treat those, the respect that you show to people that are not financially successful.
Moses, I tell you,
He loves the uneducated. Isn't he?
right.
He
Moses,
loves the uneducated.
You know, I was telling him,
Reason.
Cliff, earlier, I think that was the John Kenneth Galbraith, who had one of your quotes.
Yeah, right.
there. He said that the rich are always up to the incessant search in a way to justify the great monies they have. They know it's just,
Guilty or something? You think?
what? Yes.
They
they're-
guilty? They feel guilty?
No, they justify it. They say, for instance,
well,
you know,
yeah,
I need softer sheets because my kids need a better schools. You don't understand. I need my 5 houses and my,
Yeah,
my
right,
3
right.
yachts and so on. I think they're kind of aware. It turns out that the richer you are, generally, the less empathetic you are above a certain level. Why? Because you don't have to rely on other people. Research shows that. It makes sense. Sure. Because if you're if you rely on your neighbor for babysitting or picking up the mail or something like that from time to time, you think Trump has to rely on
He can
anything?
buy everything.
He can buy everything. He can demand it. And if you don't get it, I'm going to fire you. And he uses the coarsest
Yeah, right,
language in chewing out people. Even
Right.
Yeah, I mean, well, think about it. Does Donald Trump have any sense of community?
Have you no shame?
Have you
I
no
mean,
shame?
No, well, any sense of
No,
community, not
no.
decency. We already know that he doesn't.
Yeah, right, yeah.
My
Yeah.
point is does he have any? Can he claim a group of people as his friends, as his brethren,
would like to
as his
claim
brothers?
At the rallies,
You
he
know what I
does,
mean?
doesn't he?
He would like to claim billionaires as his
Yeah.
friends.
At the rallies, he
And
does.
I'm relating it back to your empathy
Yeah.
point, and the fact is that if he has never been exposed to people of less means than
Needy people. Yeah.
people that have to rely on the community for their day to day. I mean, of course, he's going to not.
Well, what is the operative word?
Not lack
Exposed to it. Certainly, when he was discriminating against black people in New
His
York
father,
in
yeah.
the real estate business, he was exposed to them.
Yes.
It's just that his belief and greed transcends all the personal experience he's got. It's just for him.
I don't know if he's really
I don't
exposed
think
to
he's
them in
had
an
too
average
many.
way.
I don't think he's had too many personal experiences with
Yeah.
the general public. I mean, he grew up in wealth. I mean, his
And
dad
so
was
did
a real
FDR.
estate.
So did FDR.
Right,
So
but-
he didn't
but
have
you
any.
know,
No,
the
but you
I
can't
tell you what the
argue from
difference.
example.
I think what the difference here is, though, is the religious basis that FDR and Kennedy had, the foundation that they had, which instilled a
Catholic
sense of morals into them. Trump never had that, or if he had, it's been really skewed. That's for sure. But no, both
was a man of-
FDR and
no,
Kennedy felt one was
Noblesse
Protestant,
oblige.
one was
Yeah.
Catholic. They were
Yeah.
firm Catholics, firm in their religious values. You know, the role that the rich needs to play in
Right.
society.
Noblesse oblige.
Yeah.
You have obligations. You have to take care of it.
Amen.
And you had said earlier that that sort of maybe they got the wrong lessons from the churches of prosperity, like Olstein right down in Houston, being laughed at about this. No, I think that they got it. If you're rich and you can have people who justify it, you deserve it just because you have it, and therefore that you're not interested in lifting everyone up because that doesn't do you any good. And I think that sort of philosophy just appeals to a hell of a lot of people. But interestingly, about 6 years ago, there was this dinner of bankers, of billionaires. You remember this thing? And it was an expose. This guy goes to the party there, and these guys are, the billionaire bankers and so on, are dressing up as homeless and so on, and they're having people sort of make fun of them and throw things on them too. So the reporter gets, finally, one of the very wealthy people says, who are you? What are you doing here? And the reporter says, I'm a reporter, and so they got all freaked out. But
What were they trying to do?
well, they were just celebrating their wealthy and the hell with the poor. I mean, it's not.
In other words, they were mocking the poor.
Very much
well,
mocking.
right, yeah, right,
Absolutely.
right,
And it's Trump too, right? I don't want poor people in my cabinet.
Oh, it's
no,
it's like somebody going to a Halloween party in blackface. It's the same concept. The idea that they are so inured from the insensitivity of their approach
Yeah.
because they've never been exposed to it.
How about Lynn,
You know?
the wife of Mnuchin, right? Who this woman?
Oh, that
but-
woman just smacks of privilege.
No, but
And
she
then
apparently she very contrite the last time. I was sorry, it was bad, it was all my fault. I'm so sad. I can't make up for it. I mean, I don't know what she means, but I'm glad that she sent out this last missive. I mean, it was.
Well,
oh my God.
her PR expert
Well, good.
advised
Then
her to do
I'd
that.
let her work at a soup kitchen for a
Probably.
while.
Well, exactly. Your actions speak louder than words, and her,
But,
And Romney got caught.
Yes.
And Romney got caught, really
that's right.
vast wealth. He got caught at this party, obviously, and he just wrote off 46%.
Right,
of the
47%,
population.
yeah.
He was talking to his brethren. He was talking to the rich. Unfortunately, he was listened to, or there was a mic there.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was, like a perfect example, a recent example of someone who's speaking to their own ilk.
You know what the 47% referred to? 47% of the people do not pay federal taxes. You know why? Because they don't make enough money.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
yeah,
that's
right,
it's
yeah.
we're going to
Yeah.
blame them for having jobs
Yeah,
that don't. It's but I mean, I just the lack of humanity in these people is just appalling. And especially with Trump, I mean, the head of it,
Well,
and all of
There's
the
mental
people,
health issues there with him, though.
Well, there are, but
I mean,
as a
that kind of-
psychologist, I agree with you. But I don't,
Yeah, right.
But that
He's a
doesn't
sociopath.
that
and
doesn't
so-
excuse his issues.
Oh, it doesn't. Right. But,
Yeah.
but I'm saying that there may be more than just not having the experience of rubbing elbows with the poor. Even if he did, his mental state is not able to relate to those people.
Yeah.
I don't know
It's-
what
it's
came
all-
first, the ignorance or the lack of compassion. I mean,
Inherent-
which is inherent. Which
inherent
is it
personality.
nature or nurture? You know what I'm saying? I think it's a combination of both, but it definitely was nurture because his family and his upbringing impressed upon him this elitism.
Tom Edsel in the New York Times said it took 3 generations to bring about
Yeah.
Trump and his kids.
Sure.
Entitlement.
Entitlement times 20. I mean,
Agreed.
and so and this relates all back to what we've been talking about regulations because it relates back to the role of government and the appropriateness of that role with all facets of our community, not just for specific, not
Right.
just the
No, absolutely
specific, not
agree.
just for the elite,
And people don't want to be told what to do.
right?
Well,
And you could be like say, well, I can do what I want now. I don't have to listen to my mother. And I think it was H.W. Bush who said, I'm the president of the United States. I'm not going to eat broccoli.
Yes.
Even though my mother maybe earlier made me eat. I'm the president. I don't have to eat broccoli. The point is that people just don't like to be told what to do. And if you have a lot of money, you don't have to suck up to so many people, and you can do exactly what you want to do.
or the President of the United States, apparently.
Is that what it is? Is it just the exertion of power?
No.
Is that what it all comes down to? I mean,
It does for
the
him.
desire to have power and to exert that power. What comes first, that goal, that desire, or that selfishness? You know what I'm saying?
Selfishness starts young.
I guess so.
It's-
That's
it-
what I'm thinking.
2 years, year and a half, selfishness.
That's
So-
funny.
Oh, let me
have a
let
caller?
me get this, okay?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Hey, caller, thank you so much. Where are you calling from this evening?
Brooklyn, but first, please, this is important. There is no sound being broadcast on the TV.
No sound on the TV. Oh.
I have called your staff.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right off the bat when the hour began, and they said,
Oh.
"Oh, it looks fine from our end."
Yeah, it may be, except I'm afraid from your TV, sir.
No, it is not my TV. I'm telling you,
I mean, are you listening Comcast?
this is a chronic problem with your show only.
Okay.
Whenever it's rebroadcast at different times during the month,
Yeah.
it's the same, just whispers.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Well,
Is that a big problem? You're struggling to put on a show and nobody can hear a darn
yes,
thing.
no, I agree.
That's a problem.
We'll get to that, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for the call.
No, thanks very much for calling. Appreciate that.
I don't believe you're going to do anything.
No, not
don't wanna regulate
not in 1
anything
minute. You may want to listen to it on YouTube. I think we're going to have sound for that. So, yeah, we're streaming now, and we're going to have sound on
I can
YouTube.
make sure you got to.
No, we have Sherry here, right, Sherry?
Yes.
And she is going to make sure of that, sir.
Watch your reruns.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, and it'll on YouTube especially. Thank you for
saying
calling,
about
sir.
quality
Seriously,
design.
Good
thank you.
luck.
Okay, thank you.
The joys of cable access.
No, but he's right. I mean, I appreciate that. If
Yeah, you can fix it.
Yep.
As long as we can fix it, that's all.
Yeah,
that
no, we
matters.
can.
right,
Well,
yeah.
Sherry can. She delves into the sound, and she does things and miraculous things. So
Well, I've always felt that the microphone placement is the big issue. I've always tried to make sure that it's
Well, this will be
close to
checked before we go on the air.
yes, no, it was checked. Yes. It was
Oh,
checked.
okay. Well,
Hey,
good.
how about
So
this?
something technical.
Trump wants every way of energy, to be explored. Fracking, more drilling, everything else, more oil plants and so on, except for what? What kind of energy doesn't he want?
Coal?
Clean energy.
Oh.
He's not interested, in using the sun,
No, that's-
hydropower, air, wind. No, he doesn't want any of the. You go on. So
No profit in that.
yeah, well, no, there is profit in that. It kind of reminds me, remember before the last Obama election, you had these cars down in Texas, right, that would just dump huge amounts of dark clouds into the air, just really burning gas at a hell of a clip. I mean, just sort of a thumb in the eye of people, rather like the Confederate, I think, statues and so on.
I remember that.
And thank God they're getting rid of the gosh darn Confederate statues.
Well, let's talk about renewable energy
Yes.
for a minute, because
Yes.
one of the things that you can do here on a local basis with renewable energy is just as simple as changing where you're getting your electricity, the preference of your electricity with PGE. You can ask for that clean energy option, and it doesn't
Yeah.
really add that much to it. But here in Oregon, we've actually come a long way. Did you know that both Multnomah County and the city of Portland have set up a goal for 100% renewable energy city and county by 2050?
I think
And
I
a lot of that can be done through this promotion of mass transit, through the promotion of electric cars, making sure there's a lot of places to charge those electric cars. Fundamental things like when it comes to all government buildings being powered by solar. Putting solar panels up, things like that. It's small steps that people can take towards the overall
see progress in that
contribution.
happening?
Oh, actually, you do.
Oh,
I do.
okay. Oh,
Now,
good, okay.
I don't know if it's going to happen statewide. When I was part of my platform for the state rep appointment was proposing a 100% renewable state in Oregon. And with an emphasis of wind and with solar. So it can be done. There are other states out there that are doing it. California is another
Hawaii,
one of those.
yeah.
Washington is one of those. So there's opportunity there to get off of the fossil fuel habit, if you will,
yes.
and to set audacious goals for what we get from renewable energy.
Audacious, well,
But
Yeah.
we have to do. Obviously, we're not going to get the leadership on the federal level. We have to do it state by state.
I hope that not many lives are lost if Irma goes crashing into Florida. But the idea that you have this storm that right now generating winds of 180 miles an hour, Category 5, the fastest winds of any storm that today coming out of Atlantic.
That's amazing.
If that thing crashes into Florida where it's populated, or Cuba or Puerto Rico and so on, but low-lying areas, thousands, tens of thousands, if you're not careful, could be dead.
That's the ramification of our neglect over the last 20 years. But I'm talking about the future and how
Yes,
do we
no, I
correct it.
agree. I agree.
And we've got to make sure that we hit some common sense benchmarks,
Yes.
goals, aspirations for renewable energy, at least in Oregon. Because and Obama was making progress on that. He really was. As far as trying to stimulate economic growth in those industries.
I do wish he had emphasized climate earlier. It was only towards the end of his administration when I don't know what he was. very brilliant guy. I don't know what he was doing off stage. Because I'm sure that he knew the data, but towards the end of his administration, then he was increasingly concerned about no drilling in the Arctic and so on. But it took until then for him to worry about that the last couple of months of his, and of course that's been rolled back now by Trump and so on too.
And what did he do when he first came to office? He chose to do health care.
Yes.
And he did really save lives. And I'm active in Healthcare for
Yes.
All Oregon. I just want people to know that HCAO, Healthcare for All Oregon, is a statewide coalition advocating single payer.
So say it again. What is
HCAO, Healthcare for All Oregon.
Yep.
You can go to the website hcao.org and find out about it if you're for that idea of universal coverage, because we were just talking about the storm coming into Florida
Yes.
and that health issues and so forth, and what Obama did at first. And one of the problems with Obamacare, it's great that he got done what he did, but it was a Romney plan, and it was, as Wendell Potter said, a big advocate of single payer, was the Private Insurance Sustainability Act. Because what did it do? It did a lot of good, but it forced people to buy private insurance. And so at HCAO, Healthcare for All Oregon, what we're doing is to get a publicly funded private health care will be out. And we were just talking about regulation and greed and so forth. Now the health insurance companies are not going to be for this.
Yes.
Why? Because of profit.
Profit.
And there's something called the MLR, the medical loss ratio.
Yes.
Private insurance companies have to make 15-20% of what they take for CEOs and stockholders and so forth. And just think, if there was a publicly funded, now that doesn't mean it's socialized medicine. What it means is that it's funded by your tax contributions, but the doctors and the hospitals, that is all private. And so it's the best of all worlds. Everyone goes, everyone's insurance, everyone in and nobody out. And so go to hcao.org and find out about what super regulation can really do.
When you say right,
I'm saying
getting
that
the profit out.
We are going to out-regulate the private insurance companies. They are going to be gone.
I was telling Sherry that when we had President Reagan, we did not have for-profit hospitals. I mean, they were really low in the total.
Right.
And since then, though, we've profitized hospitals, and so there are very, very few nonprofit hospitals, and they've been bought up by large combinations of people too.
Well, what's interesting too, though, the ACA, the Affordable Care Act did give us an opportunity to implement Medicare for all by opening up by creating a loophole for community care organizations, the CCOs, that like Peace Health in Washington or like Kaiser here in Oregon, to allow them to open up to all citizens as Medicare recipients, opening up Medicare to all people. And the money is already funded for it. The loophole it's allowed to happen, and you could in one fell swoop through the positive legislation down in Salem be able to cover everybody through a government program. So everybody would be able to get their health care. I think the challenge is just having the courage within the legislature to actually champion that.
We're almost done.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward in the next month, sir?
What am I looking forward to in the next month?
What are you going to keep your eye on?
Oh my goodness, Nick Fish, City Commissioner Nick Fish's health, and who starts declaring for some of these upcoming races in 2018. I'm a political wonk. What can I say?
Good. Keeps you. And how about you?
I'm looking for hearing from Robert Mueller and more reports about how he is partnering up with the Attorney General of a state.
Schneiderman. The great Schneiderman.
My hero Schneiderman, because guess what? Trump cannot pardon people who have violated state rules. And so I'm looking forward to that coming up. And we can see Trump doing all this hideous stuff, but in the background, the history is long, but it bends toward justice. It's a long road, but you have to do the bending. I'm looking forward to that. We're not hearing anything
The wheel of the gods
about the
turns.
investigation, but I mean, that is what Trump is really worried
Well, I'm
about.
looking forward to
Anyway-
that bend in the road.
Anyway,
It needs
thank
to
you
come
so
up
This
here.
is Progressive Radio and TV, the first Thursday of the month. Thank you so much, Sherry.